Hi class, this is Christian and welcome to the Advanced Web Dev class. So let's talk about Angular for a bit here. By now you should already know how to install Angular application on your machine, and I ask you to go to the Angular site here at angular.io. Just again, don't confuse this with the Angular.js. They're two completely separate application frameworks, okay? So if you go here and click on Start, Get Started, you should know how to create applications. Now, the book, let me show you a little bit on the book. The book is based on the older version. So the book is based on version 2. And believe it or not, we're just like 2 years away from when version 2 came out. And right now we're already like up to version 6, going 7. So it's moving really fast. So the book is based on version 2. And the neat thing about that is that even though we're like a couple versions up ahead, the code is still pretty much the same. Okay, just a little bit difference in a few areas, but mostly the structure, everything is still pretty much the same. Only thing though is I have to say about this book is that it's okay. It's not a great book, but it lacks a lot of diagrams, and that's something that you probably need to see to understand how all the puzzles, all the pieces of the puzzle are put together to really understand how this works. So that's one thing the book lacks. And also in the first chapter, if you scroll down, it asks you to install all this stuff, which you did. Okay. And when you create your project, though, I think it's around page 30. It does the old way, the original way how you create with usually in Angular 2. And so you have to install all these modules almost like manually by hand. And that is why I ask you to go install the application using the new version, which is the Angular CLI. So like for example here you have to create your package, right? Modify the package here, add all these different types of compiler options and add these other dependencies yourself. Okay, this is the old way to do it. I mean, if you want to build everything from the ground up, this is how you do it. Okay, but now we just do the shortcut way. And so from now on, if I ask you to build your application or create a new one, just follow this example here. So the first you install, make sure you install npm and Node.js, right? All those goodies. Once you have the npm installed, then you want to install this Angular CLI. Okay, CLI just means command line interface, where you have your own command like these right here. This is Angular CLI. You're using its own special tag to install your application. So install that with the -G. -G means global, so you install this globally across your machine, so you can access this ng tag here everywhere in your machine. So this is only once. You install this only once, just like Node.js and the npm. Okay. Once you get that, then you can create your application just using these three words here, three things here. So the ng tag, followed by the keyword new, and then the name of your application. Okay, so make sure you navigate to the location where you want to create this application. Otherwise, it will put right into wherever your cursor is. Okay. By convention, applications are built using the dash like this. Okay, so my dash app dash something something. And there's no rule really, but this is how it's done. So okay, and then once you're in there, once you create it, you can go into the directory of your application and then type in ng serve dash dash open to run your application. Okay, so that is how you create your applications from now on. I want to talk about the overview of Angular. So here, let's just go to the architecture overview right here. So Angular is composed of about 6 or 7 pieces of information. I'm going a little bit too quick here, but if you look on the left side here, you see the modules, components, and services and DI for dependency injection. But mainly, we'll talk about the components and modules. So this diagram here, it's an overview of what Angular really is. Now I can't put a marker here, but basically this middle piece right here, this is where you see on the website. Okay, so a web page is composed of components and templates, mainly this whole piece here. Okay, so Angular is you must have at least one module, which is called the root module, and one component. Okay, so in the component usually you have templates in there. So each component is usually attached to a template. So a template is nothing more than a bunch of HTML tags plus some Angular directives. You see a lot of like the double pair curlies in there already, and a few other things. All right, and these two arrows here, if you see, one goes up, one comes back down. The component here is in your code, right? Your JavaScript, well, in this case, it would be your TypeScript code, and then out to your template. So binding, you have two ways of binding here. One is you have your property binding. You're going out from the component to the view. Okay, it's just go one direction, one-way binding. So whatever you put in your code will be shown to the browser. If you think of a regular JavaScript, right? If you put a code in JavaScript, and if you target a tag and on the web page, and you display the data to the tag, the area, it will show on the web page. That's like one-way binding. And then this is an event binding. That means your data is coming from the view, like a web form or an input, for example. It's gonna pass the data back to the component. So this is usually common for input tags. So you have a selection tag, a text area, or an input tag. Mainly those three, or check mark, right? The input coming from there to the component. The event meaning like the click event, mouse over, mouse leave, enter, all those events, right? And then if you combine them both together, then you have what's called a two-way binding. Okay, and Angular has that capability along with many other frameworks as well. So what that means is that if you type something here, it changes right away back into the component, and the data reflects right back to the screen again. Okay, so you have this thing called two-way binding. We'll talk about that later. On the top left here, you have your modules. You have different types of modules, right? You have the component module. You have a module that is composed of components. We'll talk about component a little bit here. Module with services. Modules has a lot of functions, and with some values, it's like data. Okay, and then down here you have the injector with some services. What are services? Again, we'll talk about this later, but mainly things like, for example, you might have a class or a function that would do some type of calculation. That is not even a part of these modules at all, but you want to inject the data right to this component. Okay, and this is called a part of these services. Okay, but for now, let's understand the component, the template, and the module, and see how they work. Okay, so let's go back into the code here. So here is in Visual Studio Code. If you see this, that means you don't have any windows, any folders created yet. Actually, I have one here, which is the same one that we did with chapter 1, the Hello World, right? And so let's look at here, this screen here, and you'll see some things called the terminal. Okay, so typically you will go to the terminal down here. If you type in like CMD and then hit enter or click command prompt, you get to the terminal, right? I showed you that last time in the other video. You can go here and then create your application. So for example, if I want to go into a different directory, I can type that. It shows I have all these directories here. I have a directory called Angular 2. No, actually documents, right? So documents, I want to go there. So cd documents. And then in here I have a folder called Angular 2. I reserved that folder just for this project. So here it is. So if I go into the Angular 2, and in here I have two projects, the sample app and the Hello World. Okay, So from here, okay, I want to create all my Angular 2 applications in here, and then this is what you would do, like ng new, and then my app, whatever. Okay, so you can do that here. I'm gonna make sure that doesn't run. Or back in the Visual Studio Code, if you look at here, it says if you press the Control plus the backtick, you also get a terminal. Okay, the Control backtick. Or if you go to View, I think, yeah, View, and then here, Terminal. Either way. So if you click that, you get this terminal down here on the bottom. So this is similar to your terminal outside here. Okay, so you can do everything here within Visual Studio Code because you have access to a terminal. So once you're in here, then it's exactly the same as outside. I will navigate to the Documents Angular 2 folder, and I create a new project called Sample App. Okay, so you type that in there, you hit enter, and all these going to run. You're going to create all these sample, all these files and modules for you. Okay, if everything is good, it's going to take maybe a couple minutes actually. But once that's all done, then everything should be green, and you might have a couple of warning lines here. That's okay. You just ignore those. And everything's all good, then you should be back at your screen, and then you should be ready to go. Okay, and then go ahead and then go into the Angular 2 folder, right? So once you're here, and then go into the Angular. No, I'm going to the project. So cd sample app, and then now you can go ahead and type in ng serve and then dash open. So open in the browser. Okay, so you run the application, and hopefully it runs. So while that's running, the default port is again 4200 for Angular, but we can change that if you modify the configuration file. But for now, just leave it as it is. All right, so now while that's running, you want to add this sample app to, oh, okay, there it is. Okay, so there it is. You've seen this before, right? So nothing new here. It's going to go back here. So you can close this for now if you don't want to see this. You just close it, and just make sure you don't cancel the server while it's running. And close that. Actually, if you want to add Bootstrap, you can also do that too. But for now, we're just going to go in without adding Bootstrap yet. So to add the folder here, we need to go and then right-click here in this area and add a folder to the workspace. Or you can go to like the file and then add to workspace, same thing, right? Add that and go find your folder. So inside the Angular 2, inside my documents, and the sample app here, click on that and then just select that folder and click add. So here we have the sample app. I have two applications here, the Hello World and the sample app. Okay, so let's look at this. Now, you need to know how this thing works, right? So Angular needs to have one root or one master file for the view. That would be your index.html. And you need to have one root module, one root component. So those three are required. Otherwise, you can't run application. Okay? So if I go in here, inside the src folder, okay, you see the app. And again, this is by convention. You don't have to call it app, I think, but you can change it. But usually just keep it at the convention. Inside the app is where you keep all your components and your modules. We'll talk about that in a minute. So in the src folder, you have a index file. Okay, this index file is like the master file for your application. So every page every time you run Angular, you will see this. It's like the template, and you inject your application to a special tag called app root. Now, this is not a regular HTML element, right? It's an Angular element. So you put that in the body of your code. So now all what you see here, back here, everything you see here are injected to this tag. It's called the app root. It doesn't have to be called app root. You can call it whatever you want. Okay, but again, by convention, you just call app root. And to show that, if I do a F12, okay, or right click and inspect, if I click on the elements, all right, you will see that in the body tag you have the app root. Inside the app root it's all of these, right? See all these? That's why if I delete it, everything's gone. Okay, it's an app root. The head section, it's all you see in the HTML file plus a few things, maybe like injected a few scripts here. But basically you see this whole thing here, everything plus the root. Okay, so you must start somewhere, and this is the umbrella of your application. So, and then at this location, we're going to inject a module to this location here. And underneath that, you can go and add more sub-modules and subcomponents to your page. Okay, so here, I can go and then, add a navigation at the top. That will be its own component or module. I can add my, a section for my videos, another section on the right for maybe a calendar of some sort. So all those will be little pieces of widgets. We call those components or modules. Okay, so back here. So this is the umbrella of your view. The index HTML is your view. Back to that model view controller, right? Idea, concept. So your view. And you have a main.ts. Okay, so the main.ts. TS stands for TypeScript because Angular runs uses TypeScript, which is a language created by Microsoft that is built on top of JavaScript. Actually, it uses JavaScript, but it adds its own special features that regular your native JavaScript doesn't have. It does, but it's just so much more complex to write than to write a TypeScript way. So anyways, so this is the main entry to your application. So it will, when Angular runs, it's going to look for the index file, and then it will look for the main.ts file. In here, it will load all these modules, okay, and then it will bootstrap this module to that application, the index page. So inside the module, we look at the module here. In the app, as you can see, app module, you have an app module.ts. Okay, this is the root module, right? We talk about this root module. So this is the parent module that hosts the parent component. Okay, so the module here has a component called app component. And this app component, if you go a little bit deeper to the app component, okay, so the app component has a component. This is called a decorator. We'll talk about that a little bit. So a component is like the smallest piece, I could say, maybe like, well, maybe it's not true, but it is like the smallest piece of the puzzle that would store each piece of widget on the web page. So in this case, it stores the entire page you saw a while ago, and its view, it's been displayed here at this app.component.html file. This is this file here. Right, so this is the actual view of your web page. We saw you have to have the word welcome to the title. You have here some links, and then you have 3 links. That's what you see here, right? So this view is put into the component, and then you have a style sheet if you have any, and then you have to select a special root selector to inject this piece of data, this template, to the web page. So it's going to look for a module that uses this component, and it's going to insert this template to a tag called app root. Okay, and then so if you go out to the module, it imports the module here, it's going to bootstrap that module. The word bootstrap here, it doesn't mean the bootstrap style sheet. Okay, it has nothing to do with that. It's completely separate. It will bootstrap or attach this component to this index file right here. So here's the app root, right? App root corresponds to this app root here. If I change this, let's just say, something, right? Woohoo, doesn't matter, right? If I change that, my site will fail. Again, this happens instantly. Okay, so I'm live. It fails. Because I press the F12 key, you see that there's some errors, and the console says there's no such thing as woohoo. Okay? So back here. If I change that to woohoo, then my index file, if I go back to index, and if I change that to woohoo, for example, if I change that, dash, if I save that file, you'll see that it comes back as before. Okay, so you can change that to anything you want, really. It just happened to be a unique root. We call it app root. It just makes sense that way. Okay, so the woohoo here, underneath this template, has a component, and this component has its own template, and you need to inject this template to the root template, right? So under the tag called woohoo. All right, and then you need to export this app out so that the parent or the module can use it. Okay. If I find a better diagram with something, I will post it up so you can understand a little bit better. But this is how things work. So you look at the module. So a module is composed of components. Okay, you can have many components. Here we just have one component. I could add another component. If you add a component, then you need to add it to the declarations here. But let's talk about the module first. What is a module? A module is like a directory on a web page. You could think of it that way. A module is like a feature on a web page. If you remember, I talked about the different controllers and the other application. Actually, I have it open here, show you. Yeah, so this is the ASP.NET MVC, if you remember that from the other video. So here we have like the controllers. We created the home controller and the user controller, right? And then inside that, views, I also have the accommodating folders to match these controllers. I have the home and the user. So these are like features. So this is like a module. I have a home module. Inside the home module, I have three components. Okay. Under the user module, I have also three components. So kind of same thing as you see here, right? Under the module, I have one component. I could have more components if I want to. I just add a new one. And once you add a component, you create a component, you would import it here and then add it to the declarations. This declaration means if you're going to use a module in this app, a component in this module, then you add it to the declarations.